Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink, it is time for some PathOfExile discussion. Grinding Gear Games today launched patch 3.24.3. One of the things they've started doing as of a few leagues ago is towards the end of a league cycle, they put a bunch of experimental graphics changes, things that they really need to nail for 3.25.0, but it's not the end of the world if they stuff them up a little bit now when there's a lot less people playing. So, with that in mind, most of this patch is going to be graphics related changes, but there are a few bug fixes there, some of which are going to be things that you weren't necessarily certain were bugs, and that end up having some balance implications as well. With that in mind, let's go through it. The other thing I'd like to say is that this is a 4GB download, so if you've got really slow internet, this is one you probably want to start the download on long in advance of needing it. And secondly, I waited a little while until after the patch went live to see if the world was on fire on the PathOfExile subreddit or the PathOfExile official forums, and it's not. It seems like this patch is not causing widespread technical issues. Of course, your personal mileage may vary. Now, the first change, and probably the most significant one, is in the graphics changes. There is a new graphics setting that really should be called Downscale. This allows you to sacrifice prettiness of the game in order for better performance. However, for some reason they decided to name it Render Resolution. I think what they've given it is a good name for people who have anything to do with IT, but there's plenty of people that are gamers that don't have any knowledge of IT really, and as a result, I do think this was a missed opportunity to make it clearer what this setting does. The lower that you set your resolution on this, the better your performance will be and the worse image quality is going to look. This is something players have messed around with in the past. It's going to be more significant the less powerful your computer is, and it will be a more significant improvement the more people that you play with and the more projectiles that your group disgorge onto your screen, or all sorts of other things like MTX explosions and the like. Hopefully, for those of us that enjoy Heist, this is going to result in a decrease in the amount that other people's MTX degrade your performance in the Rogue Harbour specifically. I call out the Rogue Harbour here because it's the one endgame town that concentrates a lot of people into one place. The other reasons the Rogue Harbour is so bad here, firstly, it concentrates a lot of players into one screen, whereas a lot of the other towns, you'll have people who are, say, at the west end of Act 4, you'll have people who are being sent over to the east end of Act 4, and secondly, you'll have a lot of people there who are quite high level. A lot of people don't set MTX up on their character until they're solidly at endgame. And of course, in the case of new players, a lot of people don't own any MTX until they've played the game for a fair while, but the players who are found in the Rogue Harbour tend to be biased towards those people who've played the game for a long time. So with all of that in mind, the Rogue Harbour is a perfect storm of things going wrong and making this graphics pollution much worse than it otherwise would be, and I'm really hoping that this addresses those issues. There's also an upscale mode and sharpness graphics settings. Haven't tested these out yet, but I would assume that the intention here is that they allow you to sacrifice some performance to make the game look prettier. Might be worth it during the acts, but even people with an absolute monster of a PC probably don't want to do this when they're deep into endgame. There's some minor changes to VSync graphics settings, and then there's the typical line, optimize the performance of some monsters and microtransactions, that we're just going to have to find out whether this is a big thing or not over the next week or so. Additionally, after this patch, local cached assets will be cleaned up upon launching the client. What this means is that it is worth your while logging in exactly once. Even if you are completely finished with 3.24, you're not interested in playing standard, and you're not going to touch PathOfExile until 3.25 launches, it is worth your while logging in exactly once. While you're playing the game saves a whole bunch of files to your hard drive. These are things like area minimaps and the like, and once every now and again, it needs to prune these down. Broadly speaking, there's not much of a performance degradation when you've got 1,000 of these files saved to your computer, but if you've got 6,000 or 20,000 of them, then it starts being much more impactful, and that's where this cleanup process is important. So this is going to run once. It's going to take maybe a couple of minutes when you log into the game, and that'll be it. And you won't actually need to go into a character. You'll just need to get past the login screen, or maybe even just get up to the login screen in order to have this cache cleanup take place. But better to do it now than to do it while you're waiting to get into the queue on 3.25 launch day. Let's have a quick look through the bug fixes section because there's a few things in here that matter. Firstly, I've never encountered the lava chamber map bug, but apparently it was a thing. I've never encountered this bug because I tend to only do lava chamber once, and maybe once again if I get like an Elder Slayer map there or something along those lines. But for people who like this map more than I do, this will be something that could be quite significant. Next, we have a couple that are probably a bit more significant. Firstly, there is going to be a portal that opens to let you out of the Slaver King unique heist. This is going to make this considerably faster to run, and faster in PathOfExile is a lot better. If you run the Slaver King heist now, you're guaranteed to get the Chains of Emancipation unique belt, which is not ever worth very much in Trade League, but is something that's a fairly usable item on a couple of niche builds. However, you have to run in, kill the boss, then you have to run out of the heist after you've killed the boss, and that ends up doubling the time that it takes. It also ends up being fairly dangerous, although the run out is fairly good XP. That's being simplified, and it's now going to feel like the other 3 unique heists, where all you need to do is run through the lockdown phase, fight the boss, and then exit through the portal that'll appear automatically at the end. Will people start farming this deliberately? I don't think so, because the moment the best of these unique heists is probably nashed up for the XP that it gives you, and from my recollection, the Slaver King unique heist is just a bit more mediocre when it comes to XP. It's in line with mapping, but it's not in line with some of the better mapping strategies or things like betrayal encounters that give a large chunk of XP, whereas the Nashta one can compete with anything other than optimized 5 ways and optimized domination scarab of teachings farming. Fixed a bug where one of the Bramble Valley bosses was misbehaving and getting stuck in a wall. This was extremely tilting if it happened to you, so hopefully it's now completely gone. Next, there's 3 graphics bugs that are pretty minor, but that are still things that will affect a fair number of players. So Oscillatrons in heist contracts in the Fortress map, these are those ridiculously tanky monsters that don't seem to do anything really. These are now no longer going to count towards the number of monsters remaining, so the number of monsters remaining is going to be a more accurate count of the number of monsters that actually fight back. There has been a bug with Xenathar Templar Reaper, the boss of the 3rd floor of the Sanctum, and for some reason, when I've been recording this video, I have had to scrap about 5 takes because I called him the boss of the 3rd floor of the Scourge. No, he is the boss of the Sanctum level 3. He has a bullet hell type laser ability that fires lasers all across the arena. These are reasonably easily dodged if you are aware of where they are, but there was a bug where occasionally they would be invisible. This actually didn't affect top-end Sanctum players all that much, because they had the damage to just burst him down really fast before this ability came online. Where it was really difficult was when you were just getting established in the game, just getting established in the Sanctum, and now this hopefully is completely and utterly fixed. It does look like it. Groningen Games seem confident they've managed to squash this one, so hopefully we're not going to see any deaths to invisible beams in there anymore. And a couple of other graphics bugs are being fixed. After that, there's 4 things that relate to specific microtransactions only, and one of the most cryptic lines of all, fixed a client crash. That could mean that they've dealt with 95% of the client crashes that people experience, or it could mean that they've dealt with one odd case that was affecting 600 players a year. Whatever it is, it's a slight improvement. Anyways, so that's 3.24.3. You'll notice that there's no changes to Necropolis here, which is basically what we expected. I think Groningen Games learned after the removal of Harvest that adding any sort of super deterministic methods of crafting gear into the game tends to be a bad idea, because it then invalidates a lot of other areas of the game. And for that reason, I was pretty sure ever since the week 1 changes to Necropolis that it would not be going core. This seems to further cement that. However, one thing that is missing here, there's nothing talking about any support for upcoming end of league events, which is making it look less likely that there are going to be any. I think something Groningen Games could run that would be a real hit would be a long duration version of Endless Delve, but something where there's just a race that's over pretty quickly, so a race to 400, a race to 500 or whatever, and then beyond that, the event would just go on for 28 days. If people like Endless Delve gameplay, then they can play it for the whole time. I personally think there's about 20 hours of fun gameplay in Endless Delve, after which people are going to quit it, but that's fine. People could then play it at their own pace, rather than it being all in 1 week or you miss out. So that's what I would like to see. Doesn't look like it's happening, as I would have thought that would have been announced alongside these patch notes, and would have had a note in there saying, we've also made a couple of changes to Endless Delve to bring it up to 3.24 or something along those lines. So with that in mind, I think that's all we've got in these patch notes. I'm going to leave it there. May your Valobs have interesting results.